China, Sinclair Broadcasting, and Militarizing the Border. I'm Donna Davis, and this is The Square Circle.
If you have a passion for helping people, want to launch a new charity, or need to raise funds, Voluntary Solutions can help. You have a passion for helping people. We have a passion for helping you. Visit voluntarysolutionsdc.com, 844-739-5488.
Hello, and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Donna Davis. Joining us today are Patricia DeGennaro of George Mason University, Michael Shindler of Young Voices, and contract attorney Benita Talati. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This week, China ratcheted up its tariffs on several American products in retaliation for President Trump's proposed tariffs on Chinese goods. Here's the story from Fox News.
If it is not a trade war yet, it is certainly a potential trade spat. China putting 25% tariffs on, as you noted, $50 billion worth of exports from the U.S. That is over 100 key products like soybeans, airplanes, cars, chemicals. Economists were surprised at how fast China came out with these, just 11 hours after the U.S. put tariffs on $50 billion worth of exports from China. They were also surprised at how politically tactical these Chinese tariffs were. They were hitting products, especially agriculture, coming from key President Trump supporting states.
This situation seems to have escalated quite quickly. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are this. China has a variety of substantial tariffs on American goods that impede American and Chinese industry. Trump's gamble is essentially that China would rather have our trade with less domestic protections than not have our trade and retain existent or more protections.
So are you saying that they really don't care one way or the other how many tariffs we might put on them?
No, of course, they do care. And I think that the idea is that we raise the cost high enough that they will lower their domestic protections. The goal is not that both sides have very, very high tariffs, but rather that we both concede a bit and we have freer trade.
Benita, how have you seen the situation with the tariffs in China?
From what I can see, there's going to be a trade war. And if there's a trade war, that means that prices of goods are going to go up. That can lead to loss of jobs. That could actually put us in a recession.
Do you really think that it's that dire, that that could happen that quickly?
Well, I don't think it might happen right away. But I think that if both sides don't cool off and stop ratcheting it up, then it could very well lead to loss of jobs.
When you say loss of jobs, are you talking about the sectors that are specifically experiencing the tariffs?
Yes, farmers are already complaining. They're already very concerned about the soybeans.
Patricia, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Absolutely. Well, I think, Donald Trump holds true to his promises, right? He wants to shake up the system and he wants to change a little bit of what's happening as far as the economy goes and getting some control back for American consumers and American traders, basically. It'll take some time for these tariffs to go into practice. And I think basically, again, it's a shakeup of the system, and he promised negotiations, so he will be renegotiating with the Chinese. However, basically our economies are extremely interconnected and it's extremely intertwined. So it's not always going to be change as quickly and as adapt as he would like. But you're seeing definitely people concerned because you're seeing issues in the stock market that are happening right now. It's going up and down and all over depending on who comes out with which tariff and what it's on and how it's targeted. So it'll be a little bit of that tit for tat. But I think basically this is going to have to calm down because of the interconnectedness of the two economies. And we might see actually better practices from here as well as from there. And, I'd just like to say one more thing. We don't necessarily always think of a trade deficit as a bad thing, because this actually is good for American consumers in a lot of ways, because it keeps our prices down and it allows us to keep that interconnectedness in trade and the economies going. So this is something we also have to keep in mind. So again, I think it's part of his campaign promises where he's decided to shake things up a little bit, and he's doing just that. And I think we should just sit back and see things and how they settle a little bit, because he's not going to be able to move very quickly.
He said that this is how he's also dealing with it this way because of the intellectual property theft.
Yeah.
Now, this is obviously a little bit indirect against that intellectual property theft. Do you think it will be effective against that? Are there other tacks he could take?
Well, he's an entertainment guy, right? So he's absolutely, concerned with those property rights as far as the entertainment industry goes, movie goes, software goes, and et cetera, as we look down the line. So definitely, and I think it is a problem, but it's not just a problem with China. It's a problem internationally. You see these issues in the Middle East and in Europe and other places, even right here within our own country, where people are abusing the trademarks and the property rights of different types of softwares. Look at Taylor Swift, right? She came out and she said she's not going to have any downloads. So, these are the kinds of issues that we're dealing with globally. And I think actually working with China instead of being antagonistic towards them will actually be able to ease some of these tensions, not only here, but globally. We could do this together.
Are there any signals you've seen where there are overtures from China where we might be able to work together a little bit more profitably?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the president has been willing to discuss. The foreign minister has also been willing to discuss. They've brought some issues to the table, and they're willing to talk about it without getting to an antagonistic economic impasse.
What about yourself? Do you think that there are other solutions that we should be approaching?
Well, I wish that there were easier solutions, but I think that the only way for us to move forward with freer and fairer trade with China is through these rough and tumble tactics. Beforehand, we tried diplomacy, we tried kind words, we tried to make the rational argument, but clearly that hasn't worked. And what is shaking things up right now is what people are calling a trade war. It is in China's long-term interest to loosen domestic protections because, after all, after the EU, we are China's largest trading partner.
Now, we are their largest trading partner, but we've been their
second largest trading partner
for quite a long time, and yet they have never modified their behavior. Why would this be successful now?
As I said beforehand, we've tried making the rational argument. What we haven't tried doing is seriously ratcheting up our own domestic protections from Chinese goods, rather from Chinese industry, with the implication that if China were to lower its own protections, we would lower ours in retaliation.
I would like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions from our guests to our website, www.publicsquare.net, or through Facebook or Twitter, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Another big story this week was a so-called must-run segment on fake news that the Sinclair Broadcasting Group made all of its local stations air. Here is a conglomeration put together by Deadspin.
Sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So, Benita, what do you think of this? It's quite the video we've just watched.
Well, I've watched it numerous times by now, and my first thought was, this is creepy. This is absolutely creepy. To see all these anchors on local stations say the same thing over and over again, almost in unison, flipping from one channel to another, is just mind-boggling.
Is it somehow wrong?
Well, if we think about it, the cornerstone of liberty end democracy is a free, independent press. This is not Russia. We live in the United States of America. We do not live in Russia. We do not live in some authoritarian dictatorship. We live in a democracy.
Well, in a democracy, they kind of have the right to spar with their competition as well. And this is certainly a powerful way to spar.
This certainly is. However, also look at the fact that this is local newscasts. People do not watch local newscasts just to hear propaganda on a national level. People watch the local newscasts at 6 o'clock in the evening or 10 o'clock at night on Fox or 11 o'clock at night on ABC, NBC, etc. to catch local news. We want to hear about local news, local sports, local weather, local events, local community affairs, crime reports, things that's going around in our communities, not about national news.
So when you say national news, the idea that folks are getting fake news from Twitter or Facebook, wouldn't you say that that in a way is both global and local?
It's global and local, but again, why are we having one broadcasting group, Sinclair, taking over all these stations and telling them this is what you must report on?
I think Benita has a point. It's a free press. We have a constitutional amendment for free press, and we're in a situation right now where we have vast ownership of many outlets. So you have, Fox News owns quite a few outlets, as well as, the CNN, and then you have the Sinclair Group as well. So what you're having here is control of the news. And this idea that it's fake news or not fake news, I think is besides the point. What the point is that our media centers have been compromised by conglomerates. And so therefore we have corporations able to script what we're hearing instead of basically a free and fair interaction of different points of view and different opinions. Our journalists have been severely compromised no matter what they do, and they've been almost threatened or put into a fear position to do any investigative reporting or any real two-sided effort where we really have to think critically about the issues instead of just through talking points.
Is there something that should be done, given what
just
occurred?
I think that they need to be broken up. There's just, we have rules in the society about corporations owning and having too much power and owning too many outlets and facilities. And it needs to be monitored, because this is just unprecedented. Again, it's a point of, I lived in Eastern Europe and Russia for a very long time, and it's a point of them controlling the media as opposed to the journalists being able to get a comprehensive and in-depth story out. And, these are segments. I mean, how long and how much of a conversation can you have in a 5-minute segment with talking points, again, from a right and a left? You just can't do that. It's not fair, to society, and quite frankly, they should probably just be shut off.
How do you see we should handle this?
I don't see the problem. I heard the same broadcast as you both did, and I heard a perfectly cogent and important message. Fake news is a problem, and it's pervasive. There are widely distributed, poorly cited, and sometimes entirely fabricated pieces of news that people consume.
Well, that's true, and that's what the corporations are doing. They're fabricating, they're putting their own decision-making on how the stories should be covered, what should be seen, and how they should be reported on.
And wasn't this a wonderful message then? Wasn't this exactly what we needed?
Absolutely not, because if you're scripting every single thing that your anchors and your news reporters are saying, then that's really, that is intervention into the ability for people to have free speech and investigative reporting.
Be intellectually sincere. We're about 5 feet away from a teleprompter. The idea that somehow scripts are compromising media is absolutely ridiculous. Somebody writes those scripts, and we have the freedom to be here on this show or not be on this show.
They are not telling her that's what she needs to say or she needs to leave the show. This is being done collaboratively within the station.
And do you think that at
intellectually, I think that it's fair to have thoughtful and critical thinking instead of someone feeding you spoon-fed information down your throat. Do you want to talk about fake news?
Do you think that at Sinclair they're holding a gun to those anchors' heads and saying, read this script?
No, but if you have a job, you're always considering it.
Actually, they're actually threatening the employees. They have these contracts, non-compete agreements, and liquidated damages. These employees cannot even leave their jobs without a severe penalty. So they are actually being threatened economically, that they must do this or else.
Those are agreements that they signed voluntarily before signing on to those jobs. This is the age of social media. This is the age of blogging. This is the age of Twitter. Now more than ever do we have diverse news sources that aren't controlled by large conglomerates.
They're not news sources, they're social media platforms. That's the difference. Facebook and Twitter is not a media platform, it's a social media center where people talk to each other and interact in different ways. This is not news, this is not covering stories or information that's happening in the world.
Well, I'll break it to you. People get their news from Twitter. People
Well,
get
I'll
their
break
news
it
from
to
Facebook.
you, then that's why
They're not
they're
necessarily
uninformed
getting
and they
their
don't have critical
news.
thinking skills anymore.
They may think they're getting their news. They're getting something, communication.
They're
It's
getting
not
what they
necessarily
want to
news.
hear.
Let me point out something, though. Research shows, recent polls show, in fact, that over 40% of people actually trust local news. 27% of people trust national news. So the problem here is that now in many stations, including one of our own local stations here, WJLA, the source of the information has now been compromised. People are now going to start watching the 6 p.m. news, the 11 o'clock news, and start wondering, is this the news? Is this an opinion? Is this actual reporting? What is this? That's part of the problem. Now, the integrity of the journalists have been compromised. And these are people that people have been listening to, watching to for years.
And finally, President Trump proposed this week to send the National Guard to help shore up security along the southern border with Mexico. Here he is speaking at a cabinet meeting.
Been speaking with General Mattis. We're going to be doing things militarily. Until we can have a wall and proper security, we're going to be guarding our border with the military. That's a big step. We really haven't done that before, or certainly not very much before. But we will be doing things with Mexico, and they have to do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do the NAFTA deal.
The National Guard protecting our borders just to the south. What are your thoughts, Patricia?
Well, I think this is a very dangerous move. I think Trump has these strategies, basically, that if he doesn't get his way, he's going to cause a disturbance and a little chaos. And, he's playing to his base here, saying, because he can't get the money for the wall. We don't have the money for the wall. We're giving more money to our military, so we just don't have the flexibility for that. So this is a way to play to the base while he tries to manipulate or figure out strategies to get that money for the wall. Now, our National Guard has two specific purposes. The first purpose is to support our troops in event of war, which means when they went to support troops in Iraq and or Afghanistan, and also where they're being called occasionally to support COCOMs in Eastern Europe and Africa, or in Europe and Africa and the Pacific. The second one is to be available for emergencies, usually within the state or externally requested for the state. So these are the two reasons we have a National Guard, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to support our border. They're also prohibited to be used for law enforcement activities. Now, I know that other presidents have used them for backup in certain instances, but it's been a very small number for a very short period of time, usually 2 to 3 months, in order just to get some situations in order. However, he's talking about putting a full-scale 100,000 troop National Guard at the border, and he's not going to be able to sustain that either, based on the way that the Guard is set up and the commitments that are expected from these members. So I think it's going to be pretty tough for him. Now, I really think it's a ploy, though, so I'm not really sure. There have been nothing worked out. It's basically a ploy to shake up things so he can find another way to get what he wants and also look like he's getting what he wants for his base support.
Do you think that the spending of this money for the National Guard, isn't that possibly the same kind of money that could have been used for the wall?
It possibly could have, but there is past precedent, actually, to have the National Guard, as you just stated. And President Obama did that, President Bush did that. And so,
And they weren't used for law enforcement, though, and they were used for a very short time. In fact, they didn't even have arms at the border during this time.
but from what I understand, even this time around, they're actually going to be careful. They do understand that they cannot be used for law enforcement purposes.
We can't
And we
confirm
did have the
that.
caravan.
You
So
can't.
there is some argument, I think, to support having some National Guard troops at the border.
You can't confirm that because the details haven't been worked out yet. And that was clear with the Homeland Security Secretary today, as she said.
Do you think this might just be grandstanding again?
Might it be grandstanding? Maybe, but I certainly do think it's absolutely wild. This is a card right out of like Ron Paul's playbook, and never in my life did I think that Trump would be pulling cards out of that playbook in particular. I'm not sure how effective it'll be because most legal immigrants end up here simply by overstaying their visas. I do think that the political optics will be absolutely riveting if it's put into practice.
So that's, again, I agree with that
I
point
agree with that.
100%. I think it's a political ploy.
So are you saying that we don't have that many folks coming across the border on a day-to-day basis and that it's really just folks who already live here? I thought that we had lots of folks coming across the border on a regular basis.
The immigration issue is twofold. We have, one, people coming across the border, but two, we do have people who overstay their visas.
Well, again, I think it's become a political issue because since all of these threats and political moves have been put into place by Mr. Trump about the wall and making Mexico pay for it, people have been less apt to come in and cross. And in fact, statistics have gone down, and I'm sure, I know we don't have any visuals for that, but it's out there, and you can see it even in Congress has been talking about it. I mean, I think our concerns are not immigrants really on the border. The concerns are more criminal gangs, drug activities, opioids coming across. And in those instances, I think that, we need to really understand with our current border patrol how to work with those particular activities. This is not an immigration issue, although he's making it one. And it's a division of our society.
All right.
Which is just unfortunate.
All right, let's take some questions from our viewers. Craig Terry asks, what is the best way to deal with China's unfair trade practices other than tariffs? Benita, I'll throw this one to you.
Wow.
Other than tariffs,
Other than
what can they do?
The free markets. Companies can actually decide to manufacture things here rather than in China.
So in other words, you think that we can somehow be competitive enough to fight the extremely cheap prices that China is able to flood our market with?
I think it's about demand, right? If we have a Buy American campaign, which we do have going on, I think we can actually have more manufacturing done here in the U.S.
So does that mean subsidizing these products?
If it means subsidizing, then it means subsidizing.
What about yourself? How do you think we might be able to deal with this?
I don't think that
Other
there
than
are
tariffs?
any effective alternatives to tariffs, to full-on, well, not a trade war, but putting real serious economic costs to these domestic protections that the Chinese refuse, thus far, to pull down. Saying that the free market is going to somehow fix things, that we can move throughout the free market, for example, like spurring domestic production or using government subsidies, well, that costs the taxpayers, and it's unlikely to happen. Like the taxpayers like being able to get products cheap, and we do get products very, very cheap, and it subsidizes the well, not subsidizes. It makes the middle class lifestyle that Americans love possible.
This is true. Patricia, do you have any thoughts on the subject?
I think the middle class is pretty dwindled at this point. I think we need to learn how to
Good
run
point.
our government. That's what I really think. And, we really have gutted, we've gutted the tools that we have at our hands in order to be able to negotiate and work with other people. And we've mistakenly used the military for every answer to every problem that we have at this moment. So we've lost a lot of our good brain power to be able to deal with these issues.
Our next question is from Karen Schneider. Why are liberals concerned with media bias only when it has to do with conservative bias? I'm going to throw this one to you.
Well, I think I certainly think it's unfair to paint liberals or the entire left with one big, broad brush. Really what you're hearing in the news is a few extraordinarily vocal folks. In general, everyone is concerned with media bias. We don't like, or even personally, when I read my favorite magazines or the places that I contribute to, I don't scrutinize them as much as I scrutinize, say, articles from Jacobin. But I should. I think that if the left, if I can use that general term, doesn't care as much about media bias with regard to their own publications, it's because of the way that our own psychology works. And that's just a matter of, a personal improvement on all of our parts.
Benita, what are your thoughts?
Liberal media and bias.
Liberal media and bias, that is touted way more than conservative bias.
I think it's because of the time that we're living in right now. I think that there's been this energy since 2016. And you see that right now we have this administration that's very clear on what they want to say about liberal media, fake news, so on and so forth.
You know, the bias has been ongoing, and it comes during the Obama administration. It came from the right. During this administration, it's coming from the left. So it's kind of, back and forth, tit for tat almost is where we've gotten. Again, we're not talking about issues. We're not talking critically. We're talking about polarizing, ourselves. And this is not really good for the health of the country.
Okay, and now it's time for the most underreported story of the week. Who'd like to start?
I'll start. So one underreported story is barely even a story. Yesterday on Twitter, Marco Rubio, who famously in the presidential debate said, we don't need more welders, or rather, we don't need more philosophers, we need more welders. So apparently, according to his Twitter feed, he started to read the Stoics, and he said, we do need philosophers, as it turns out, to make sense of the world, in his own words. And I think this reflects a maturing consensus that the things that are most important right now are not political mechanics, but matters of epistemic meaning and the age-old question, what is the good life?
What is the good life? That's a great question. Benita, what's your most underreported story of the week?
I think the most underreported story of the week is the press conference that was held by the minority students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. These are students who have largely been ignored by the media, who have a different perspective, and who just have not had the same opportunities to get their message out. They have a different view about the increased law enforcement on their campus. They have different perspective than these other students who have been getting a lot of press attention.
And just to be clear, we're talking about Parkland.
We're talking about Parkland, yes.
And Patricia, what's your most underreported story of the week?
Well, I think my most underreported story of the week, or non-reported story of the week, would be the chemical weapons centers that they found in Iraq and also in Syria that were owned and operated by ISIS. So this is showing us right now that, we've been blaming the Assad regime for a long time for atrocities against his own people, when in fact it's foreign fighters and expatriates coming in that are fighting him and or his supporters and using these kind of chemical activities. Our press hasn't looked at it. We haven't talked about it. It's being reported, in the Middle East and in other areas and in Europe, but we just seem to not want to, again, talk about the holistic parts of the issue. We just want to talk about how we feel and hear what we want to hear, or how our things that support our own ideals and our own thoughts.
I'm going to take this opportunity to point out that people could educate themselves.
That's correct.
As to global resources for news.
Well, one of the most beautiful things about this country is that we have the ability to educate ourselves.
Exactly.
But we don't.
And use those global resources.
That's correct.
Well, that's all for this week. I'm Donna Davis. Thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.